Hey guys, welcome to another episode of All Bass Creations. Oh, don't want to spike it up too much there. Welcome to another episode of All Bass Creations, effects, tutorials, demos, and review. I am the Bass Nagus. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Hit that like button if you haven't already. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. So the topic today is going to be a way, we do a lot of bass synth on this channel. So everybody doesn't always have a bass synth as a bass player, right? So what a lot of us already have is things like octaver, drive, filters, and modulation. And I've been reading a lot of comments on the different synth pedals and stuff, and a lot of them, the majority of them they think they're just pretty much an octaver with an envelope filter and some drive. And that may be true for some of them, but definitely not true for these ones you see here, and even the C4 synth. The Future Impact, MXR Bass Synth, Enzo X are real synths. So what we're going to do here is not just show you how to simulate some bass synths, but I want to actually do some comparisons between real bass synth sounds and octavers, and just to kind of make it even, I'm going to use the MXR bass synth against octaver, drive, and filter. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the two octave sounds that we have here. We got the Pog 3. Right, real subby. And we have the Enzo X octaver. So these particular octavers greatly depend on the sound and tone of your bass. Right now, tone is around there. Right? On an octaver. So it also gives me somewhat of my actual dry sound just down an octave, right? It keeps some of the tonality of my actual bass in there, but we're going to shape some of that out with a filter. So you might actually be better off with something like, if you're going to do this, you might be better off using two filters. One like a low pass one, so if I'm on the Pog 3 or something similar, if you got like a Pog 2 or a Hog 2, or just something where you have some sort of tone control, because I know even on like the multi-effects units that have octavers and things like that, they'll typically have some way to shape the sound a little bit more, cut out some of the highs, boost the lows or something like that. And if you don't and you have a multi-effects unit, this is where EQ comes in handy, because you can use an EQ like a filter. EQ is actually a filter. So you can easily roll off some of those high end, just like I'm doing here. Get that to a nice almost like a nice smooth sine wave. Right? Almost like the bottom of a triangle shape, right? So that's the sound I'm typically going for. So with the POG 3, right now all I have is the octave up and all the other effects are off, no envelope. This is in the center, no resonance. Right? So now I'm already in that synth bass territory. If I wanted something like an additional octave up, if you got something like this, the Poly Blue octave or the OC5, you'll have access to multiple octaves, which also helps you give the illusion of having multiple oscillators. So, you know, I can do right? So you can go with something like that. Make sure they're spreading that on. There we go. Right? So you may not always have that option. Some octavers, you know, may not have an octave up, but that is also something that you can do. So yeah, all foolishness definitely will get ignored if it's not in on the bass. If it's not about bass effects, oh, you're definitely getting ignored. So just to let you know, I see it. I'm just not going to answer it because it has nothing to do with what we're doing. All right, so now that we got nice little octave sound, we want to throw some drive on there. And if you wanted just like a smoother sine bass wave, you can go with that sound. If you wanted to get somewhat of like some distortion, or like if you wanted to simulate having a saw wave in there, that's where we use a bit of distortion and overdrive, things like that. So we can do that in several ways here. Don't want to say that, so we'll do it over here. And we'll have this drive section there. All right, so matter of fact, I'm just gonna come over here, put it on the drive. And here we can actually add, I like to actually use like big crushing and things like that. So let me see, matter of fact, let's run that. Cause I'm gonna put it on the dry. So that's one way of doing it. Of course, you can mix that based on the amount you want. We can come over to here. So basically, octave, we're using this as a bit crusher pedal at the moment. So we're already getting into that synth territory just using the bit crusher and the octave sound so far. Here they are separately. Just to give me a bit of bit more harmonic content in there for the filter to sweep on. So that's going to be the key point. Just like I told you guys yesterday that caught the live stream yesterday with dealing with bass synths. You know, getting that oscillator type sound together before you add the filter or anything else definitely will help out. You know, that's why I use the filter over here a bit to shape the octave sound drive. And now I'm going to put the filter over here just to kind of simulate using 3 different pedals, you know. Put it on the dry. So we'll go there. And we're also going to add a bit of drive on there. I also like that you have a spread on this filter on the Mercury X. That also, if you're wearing headphones, you really can hear. But say we don't need all that. So now we're just going to attach this to the envelope or an LFO, and basically you'll be able to create different types of filters that way. You can, with the modifier section in the Mercury X and the Enzo X, you have 2 LFOs, sample and hold, which is a random number generator. You get the envelope. You can use it, basically the sound, whatever parameter can be triggered by the input of your bass or guitar, whatever. And you also have the hold function and the expression pedal, so I can use it like a wah-wah pedal if I wanted to. So I think we'll start with an envelope filter, and what we're going to do is assign this filter frequency to the envelope. So, like I said, there's a lot of ways to get things done. You just have to spend some time experimenting. So, even in this, make sure nothing else is on. So there's your pretty much your bass. You bring this volume down a bit. And of course you can take that octave up out. Add in some dry signal if you wanted to. So lots of ways to get that done, and we can also make that go to the LFO. So, bam. Now you can make that more severe by adding, or more prominent by adding some resonance, things like that. Even adding spread. Now the other thing I like to do is also add detune and chorus to something like that. Now realistically, you know, you don't want your sounds too different like that. So you can get some real nice sweeps that way. I'm gonna also do it from the Enzo X as well, just because in Enzo X I have a full ADSR for the filter section, versus the Mercury X doesn't have a full ADSR because it's not a synth pedal. So let's get some filter section in here going. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and switch to this octave sound in general. Let's see what I just changed here. So instead of having that filter stagnant like that, I can also add some drive to the signal. Now I wonder what it sounds like with some drive running into it. I believe that's around the 70s. Change this over to bass real quick. So throwing on a little overdrive before or after definitely can add you some nice texture as well. So let's adjust this filter. Okay, so let's let's bring this volume down just a bit. So the real key is setting up this filter. See, it almost has like that synth texture. Now, I would recommend adding some detune. And then come and add in some chorus. Or phaser. And if you don't like those harsh beginnings, if you want to shape the sound, you can also add a time to the attack of the sound, which you can do in the POG 3 with the attack slider here. The further you up, the longer the sound takes to come in. But adding just a little smidge kind of adds to the synth bass sound. So here we'll do a little bit of attack on here. So essentially, by taking 4 different effects, right? We took an octave down. That's literally just an octave down with some drive, right? And I think we had, just some drive and some distortion, right? So I did the distortion going into the octaver to just make it more of a, add some grit to the sound, while I also added a nice filter and kept the resonance within reason. I pretty much just set it up how, other than the bass sound and the octave down sound, like everything else was pretty much designed to emulate parts of a synth. The octave down sound is just giving me that sub-octave, adding some grit on top of that, and then filter, and then some modulation. Now, let's try to build something right, something similar on the MXR. So again, we're only gonna do, let's see, we did just an octave down, so we'll do just an octave down here as well. And we'll just use a square wave. Oh no, we use some octave, unison octave as well. Bring that down. So we already in that territory already. Nice sub synth type sound. We can actually open this cutoff sound. attack time to that. You can do that on the MXR as well by holding the voice button and turning the envelope knob a bit. Which is a whole different sound. Oh, I forgot I added that phaser on there as well. So in fact, we'll take that phaser off because that phaser going to add quite a bit to the sound. So let's not open this filter up so much. So where I really feel like people are getting it confused between an actual bass synth and an octave down drive and filter. The main difference is the sound source. That's the only main difference. Like a bass doesn't have all the sub frequencies and just the same exact characteristics of actual oscillators, right? So it can't get you that exact synth bass sound, but you can get close. You know, we've always been able to get close. Now you take that octave, that fade in out. And this is probably the closest comparison that I've ever, I mean, not ever. This is probably the closest or around the closest you're gonna get to like a real bass synth sound without using an actual oscillator. Because like I said, you can use a drive. I'm using the same drives, same filter, negative 24 dB filter that I would use on bass synths. And I'm also I'm using the same drives, distortion, everything. Even the modulations are the same that I would be using because it's all on the Enzo X. And I showed you how to spread it out across 3 devices. But ultimately, if you have an octave down, and it could be something like a Poly Blue OC5, the octave, of course OC2 if you can find one and it ain't $1 million, but I wouldn't even recommend getting the OC2, to be honest. Just get your OC5. They're going to track way better, and you can the sound is really good. Like, it's already a nice round big sound. So got that versus and just to make it completely fair, let me see how I can do this. If I turn this, then it's going to give me all dry sound. Just a little bit of dry signal in there. So, you know, I think that's one of the harder things for a lot of people to wrap their mind around when they're hearing something like the MXR bass synth being used. And one of the reasons it sounds so similar to an octave down drive and a filter is because that's what an actual synth is using to change the sound. So some of the process is the exact same, you know, but the main thing is going to be an oscillator the different oscillators give you different sounds. So while I can get to that square, you know, most of the octave down pedals is going to, you know, a lot of those are using a square wave. Now the POG 3 and the Enzo X octavers are actual octavers. It's just taking your signal and dropping it down an octave. Versus, you know, like an OC5 that's not your sound down an octave. That's, you know, it's tracking and it's like a square wave it's putting out. So it is very close to a synth pedal because it already has one of those oscillators, and then you just kind of use the other octaves as the other oscillators. But in order to get to real true synth bass sounds, the reason why you can't duplicate Michael Jackson bass sounds and things like that with a octaver and drive is just because the combination of oscillators. So the combination of a saw wave and a square wave is going to be hard for you to duplicate, even though I can get close. So now, you know, something like this is a little more difficult to get to. And even if I was to run my actual dry signal through here, only thing that has changed is, like, because the filter settings and all that on the MXR bass synth are the same right now as when I had it. is that oscillator. So if I open, like, you literally have to try to duplicate that. That's the oscillators that I'm using for that sound. So that's what the raw oscillators sound like, but when you put it to the actual filter, so with that, you know, it definitely will, it's a whole different sound. Let me see. I'll give you another example of why, yes, you can simulate the bass synth, but it won't be an actual bass synth. If it was, we wouldn't be worried about getting bass synth pedals. Like those of us that really use the effects, we know the difference between a real bass synth sound and an octave drive and filter. Pretty obvious difference in the sound. So this is without that filter. That's literally the signal. You know how hard it is to get your bass by itself to go from a regular bass sound to without any tracking, you know, with just an octave drive and filter. These pedals are way more than that. They are real synth pedals. Like I said, that's the raw oscillator. If I run it through the same filter over here, so let me get a little lower. Huge difference, you know. Not that this isn't a good sound. But you're gonna have to get that to respond the same way, and that's where it becomes pretty difficult to, especially when you start really getting into some complex bass synth sounds. It's really hard to duplicate that with octave drive or distortion and filter. And even throwing in the modulations, you can get really close. But you know, by the time you do that and you buy 1, 2, 3, 4 different pedals, you could have just got a bass synth pedal. So, you know, that's my only thing about when I stopped trying to simulate a bass synth and actually got an actual bass synth. The ones that have come out in the last 2 to 3 years are amazing. As you can see, I still using the best octaver available. I still use that because I use it for different sounds. I don't need to simulate bass synth, and if I actually like an octave down sound with my bass, you know what I'm saying? Like that is a sound that I cannot get from synth bass. So it's not just one way. You know, the octaver and the effects chain can simulate the bass synth, and you know, somewhat, and vice versa, but they are never the exact same thing because of these sources. And I actually got this one to sound pretty massive. Like this one has a very nice stereo spread to it. you know, it's that's how you would do it though. You know, you want to shape that octave down if it's not already shaped, like a OC5, MXR Poly Blue. If you use it in mono mode, the octave down sound is just amazing. And I actually love the octave down on the monophonic side of the Poly Blue. It just, oh, sorry. It just sounds so blue. Like it literally versus, and that is something that, you know, you will have to pay attention to. Different octavers have different sounds, but octavers like the POG 3 and the one in the Enzo X are going to be more exact copies, like your signal, not exact copy, like buffered versions drop down an octave versus the Poly Blue in monophonic mode is going to be more like pretty much square wave, a big square wave on the bottom. So you know, bass synths, they're relatively simple to build, whether it's with the octave, drive, and filter, modulation, or just the actual bass synth. It's just most of the time it's 2 oscillators, 2 to 3 oscillators, right? And those oscillators just running into the filter. Set the filter's cutoff to your minimum that you want the filter to drop to. Set your filter envelope to a positive amount most of the time. If you want to do a negative, then you got to change your filter cutoff. I explain that in other videos. But, you know, you want to pretty much, the filter settings is going to be one of the main things. Then other things are just going to color that additionally. So I'll give you another example. Where is that? Bass synth filter. So even running, this is the oscillator by itself. So it's the reason you need that drive in between the octave and the filter in the effects chain, if you're trying to simulate synth bass, is because of the textures of the actual oscillator versus literally same filter settings. It's just this filter on the Enzo X. You know, if you wanted to. So it's just going to be a whole different sound just using your bass by itself with the same filter settings. So that's where your main dilemma is going to run in. You're going to run into your bass, your actual bass sounds envelope is different than the synths. You know, ours is pretty much all decay from the moment we hit the bass string. it starts decaying. And the only way to keep it at that same consistent volume is to keep playing. So with that restriction as well, it makes it difficult to get, without having an ADSR or something like the MXR bass synth where the ADSR is pretty much already mapped out with all sustain. And, you know, it's the same way you would on a regular Moog bass or anything like that. So, but the same filter on a nice octave down. It just doesn't have the same harmonic content in there as, you see, that just stays there as long as it's detecting signal. So that's another thing that makes it hard for the octave. It's just really loud. So I highly recommend, if you want to get to bass synth sounds, get you a bass synth pedal. Just to be honest, by the time you buy an octaver, a drive, a filter, and a modulation pedal separately, you know, you spent way more money. You know, especially if you wanted to get something quality. Bass synths like the MXR bass synth isn't crazy expensive. It's like $289 if you can find it. You can find the Future Impact anywhere from $350 to $400, depending on what's going on. And the Enzo X you can actually find for $600. And in addition to that, the main, if you have something like a Future Impact V4 VIP or the Enzo X, the main thing that's going to put it over the top over that combination of pedals is you can play it with a MIDI controller, something you cannot do with most octave pedals. Now, the POG 3 does allow you to play it with MIDI, so I can take that same sound there. Let's see, channel 2. See what we got going on here. This one. Oh, that's channel 1, sorry. So in this case, you know, yes, you can play it synth bass with the POG 3. If I wanted to add some envelope and see if I can get some overdrive into this thing. Oh yeah, I forgot, when you're using that, you can't even do it. So what I would do in that situation, I really don't have a choice. So So I got filter there, even got some detune. I won't be able to add any drive. You get all your like organ bass type sounds. Which is insane. So you can actually get synth bass out of the Pog 3 as well, you know, and you still got your other octaves if you wanted to, you know, get nasty with it. You got panning and all that other stuff. So the octave pedals even these days are getting into the MIDI game where you can play them with your MIDI controller, which definitely like gives you a whole different side to the Pog 3. You know, it doesn't even sound that same way if I play with my bass. Same exact settings, just these are real octaves. Where they're trying to take a copy of your bass and just transforming it versus when it's just tracking, when a pedal is just tracking, it'll have that more shaped, it'll probably be more of a square wave. So that's some of the main difference between octavers. People don't really understand either. They think, you know, the Poly Blue, the OC5, those are when you're using those in monophonic mode, you know, those are tracking and putting out like a square wave. You know, Pog 3, you're gonna have to shape it a lot more in terms of the octave down to get it to sound the way you want it to sound. People heard a few complaints about that, but simply, if you take out all the other octaves, take out that envelope, take out the resonance, detune, just, you can hear the sound, right? Just bring that filter down. If you want to run an octave up and your dry bass sound, and you'll get that classic octaver sound that you know, we love. We don't even, for me, I'm not always going for a synth bass sound. Like sometimes I'm literally going for an octave down sound with a filter on it because to me, a synth bass can't get that exact sound. You know, it can emulate it, but it can't quite get it. And look at this bass synth it creates. They got bottom on that. Like nice organ style bass. So having multiple octaves. So yeah, octave downs are amazing. You know, the individual effects route is amazing, but if you want to get true bass synth, just get a true bass synth pedal. And like I said, if you want something that you can play, that's an octaver, the Pog 3 You can play with the with MIDI as well. The POG 3 is definitely a great option. Plus, it's going to give you it's like an organ module, so you don't have to just go with your synth-based sounds. You can even add like a little slap back type delay. Very short delay. So I always try to keep as open mind to sounds as possible, not just obvious sounds, you know. But if you're on a budget and you know you need something that will allow you to get all of that done, the multi-effects units will have octave, drive, and the filters in them, as well as modulations. So that's only 4 effect slots on most effects units, and that's very well possible. Things like the zoom units, the line 6 units, typically will allow you to have that amount of effects in there, and that's all you really need. And then from there, you know, after that, you might want to throw it through a preamp or something that will allow you to pretty much shape the sound additionally if you want to get it more bottom or less high end, or vice versa. So, you know, it's really just knowing your gear, knowing what effects do what and what order to put them in. And so sometimes with octavers like the POG 3 and the one in the Enzo X, where they're giving you more closer to your exact sound, you know, you can run distortion or overdrive into them, and that also will give you a different texture. And if you listen without the dry signal, as you can hear, adds like a little bit of buzz to it. Set this to be a little bit more sensitive with the trigger. going on, folks? Appreciate you chiming in from Russia. Appreciate that. Appreciate all you guys hanging out with me. Means the world to me. And if you haven't checked out Patreon for all my preset packs, definitely do that for the Future Impact 20-something preamps for the Tone X stuff, bass preamps and bass amps, Enzo X, Mercury X, C4 synth, and we also have preset packs for the Zoom MS60B Plus, B6, and MS70 CDR. So check out Patreon for all those preset packs. And I'll be coming out one for the Pog 3 and an update for the Enzo X. And you can, that's a pretty cool sound right there. Trying to figure out why it's not triggering as much as I want it to. Listen, I'm not a huge fan of this filter. I like the filter on the Hog 2 a lot more. Definitely appreciate that. Appreciate that. Yeah, it takes the octave down sound still is here. You know what I'm saying? It's still in style. It's not the same as a bass synth. It's just and I think that's a misconception that a lot of people have about bass synth pedals, especially the ones, they look at the MXR bass synth. No, it doesn't sound, it's not a keyboard replacement like the Future Impact and the Enzo X are. Those two pedals will replace keyboards for sure. But the MXR bass synth still is a real bass synth, which is not just an octaver with some drive and a filter. It's not the same thing. Totally different sounds, but each sound can be something. It's not like each sound is desirable, put it like that, So I wouldn't sleep on either one. If you was using more of a rock, doing a rock type of song, you can get something maybe a little more balanced. Just shape that up some more so it wouldn't be so egregious. So, what's going on, folks? Appreciate you chiming in. Definitely appreciate that. Yeah, you can use, if you have a synth already, or I gave a few alternatives. Gave you an alternative to just the regular old bass synth sound, but to me, I still classify that as bass synth, octave, drive, and filter. It's just a different type of bass synth than key bass, Definitely appreciate you. Yeah, it wasn't that this was a pre-record. You know, I just wasn't gonna respond to that guy. You know, you can't give those people what they want because then they just keep typing. And as you saw, he kept typing just to try to get some attention. For some reason, he doesn't have attention in his life. But you guys, I'm going to respond to. You know, I know the people to respond to and the people just to let them do their little thing. They ain't even interested in bass at all. So I'm playing a Artisan Bassworks custom Fidelity 6-string bass. And so this is actually the only bass like this. I can't get another one. That company doesn't exist anymore. But it is stupid light, super balanced. Like I don't have to have the strap on it for it to sit properly. It'll just stay there. And it balances, no neck dive, as you can see. So that makes my playing hand very happy. Definitely makes my playing hand very happy. You know, my left hand, you know, to the point where when I play other basses, I can only play them with a strap. Like I can't play without a bass strap on other basses. This is the only one. What do I think of him? I don't know. I don't really, to be honest, I don't listen to other bass players like that. Like he's not somebody I would listen to in terms of what I do. You know, I know how to play slap bass, and his style of slap bass isn't really what I do. I respect what he does. You know, I think he's a great musician, but he's not, you know, necessarily who I would listen to get my style. Or I mean, I don't actually listen to bassists in general, to be honest. Like I've never really listened to them other than for the part I gotta play. Just being honest, a lot of times other musicians are tending to stretch out more knowledge-wise, harmonically and melodically than a lot of bassist solos. That's why a lot of people tend to turn off during bass solos. It's not that they don't like bass solos, it's that what the people are playing isn't really what they want to hear. Like, if you're going solo, right? So I'll give you an example. You get a lot of bassists, they think you playing the same part you've been playing all day. You've been doing this all day for the whole song, right? Here comes the bass solo. What does he do different? Nothing. It's like, come on, are you going to solo or not? Are you actually going to solo, or are you just going to do a bunch of fills? Because there's a difference between a bunch of fills. I have to tell drummers this all the time. There's in between fills and when you're actually doing a solo. So if I'm doing a funk song, right, and there's a crowd dancing, yes, I will do fills, not really a real bass solo, not real solo. That's different. That's just to keep the crowd dancing. That's because it's not really a good time for me to break up the groove and things like that. Now, when it comes to playing over changes and really having a real solo, that's your time to, you know, really play a solo. So if you're doing like all the things you are, get this bass tone straightened out here. Sound paper thin. Right? I'm gonna actually play a solo. So actually playing a solo, you know, that will definitely, that's what I don't see a lot of bassists doing, for some strange reason. Or they don't, even if they are going and actually trying to actually build a real solo, they don't really build it in motifs and phrases, like Pat Metheny would. Pat Metheny has some of the most structured playing, you know, you'll hear, like in terms of soloing. Like you can hear the clear motifs, the clear phrases, and he executes them in longer stretches. So he might stay with a motif or a phrase that he's doing. You know, he might, by that I mean motif, he might just stick with thirds or something. You know, so just the motif is just going to be, but he might go, you know, just stick with the thirds and switching scales. That's really actually how you solo. You take motifs, phrases, and you turn them into, you move them over to chord changes. Yeah, I mean, it ain't really about the sixth string though. It's not really that, because Jaco could solo. Jaco could play like a real bass solo that you can pick out the motifs. It has even parts that you would, you know, that catch your ear and have you, you know, that are very melodic. Who else? Richard Bona is another one. If you naming bassists, now it ain't a lot of them, so don't get me to naming names. Matt Garrison is another one. Great player. What's my man? Damian Erskine. I actually like his solos a lot. He actually be doing some dope stuff in there. Trying to think who bassist that gives real solos. Yeah, that's I'm gonna end that right there before I get in trouble. Don't get me in trouble naming folks. You know, but yeah, like I tend to listen to actually more guitars, like Greg Howe is one of my favorites that never gets mentioned. You know, he was Michael Jackson guitars, but he is far more than Michael Jackson's guitars. Come on now. Yeah, Victor Wooten is amazing, you know, but, and I love Victor Wooten's playing, of course. I've learned a ton of stuff from Victor Wooten, in terms of, not a ton of stuff, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna be one of those people that just be, yeah, learn, you know, just because, nah, I didn't. What I got from him was, you know, seeing him do this flamenco guitar technique. And the rest of it I took and applied that to my own stuff. But he was the first person I saw doing that, you know, but he got it from his brother who got it from flamenco guitars, so. And just using more of your right hand to do more. So I from bass players, I would say, you know, I took the general techniques of things, like, you know, how to properly play bass, like without the extra notes, muting, proper picking technique. I learned that from a teacher though, guy named Dave Marsh. He's an amazing bass player, still around, still one of my mentors. I still call him, ask him for advice on different things. He's the one that got my technique and stuff together. So he's actually the person I credit the most out of bassists. You know, he actually plays 7-string. And and I learned so much from him in general. I actually did an interview with him on my channel a while back. It had to be 6, 7, 8 years ago now, but his name is Dave Marsh, amazing bassist, you know, so if you ever get a chance, his stage name is The Magic Bass as well. So let's see, I appreciate that. Yeah, 4-string is perfectly fine. I know a bunch of 4-string players. Like some of the guys I named in that list play 4-string. Yep. You wanna grab. For me, I'm a melting pot of musicians. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't even, my ex-wife used to say that to me all the time, because she was like, you never actually sing when you're like singing or you're playing or listening to a song, you're never singing the bass part. I know. I never sing the bass part. I'm usually singing a solo over it or something like that, or soloing over the changes, but I just, playing the bass line is playing the bass line. It ain't that hard. Like, just play the bass line. The bass lines are easy. We have the easiest parts in the band. Now, we have to be some of the most consistent people in the band, but we are definitely, if we being honest, we got the easiest parts in the band, and some of us don't even learn that much. So, you know, we have to take some accountability as bassists, as a community, you know what I'm saying? And people wanting to hear us or not hear us, and what gets pushed a lot, you know. A lot of you guys can play. Like, a lot of you guys can play that are listening, that follow me or whatever. A lot of you guys, as the old saying goes, it takes one to know one. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of you guys can play. And when I see you guys on Instagram, follow me and stuff, I do check out your stuff at times, you know, when I have a 3-second. But, so I know you guys can play. And I be shocked, like, you guys follow me, you know. I appreciate it, man. You know, I don't take that for granted that you guys spend time learning whatever you can from me. You might not be here for the playing advice, you know, or whatever. You might just be here because you like to hear different sounds. So, but whatever it is, I appreciate you all, and that's the most important thing I want you guys to take away from all this. But, yeah, spread your wings with different musicians. Joshua Redmond, amazing soloist and songwriter. I tend to like musicians that are composers as well. I really don't listen to musicians who don't write their own music. Like, that's not really my bag. There's very few people I listen to like that, like, that don't write their own music. I'm not going to go listen to if I want to hear somebody, I want to hear your music too. I think that's part of the artistry being lost with musicians. Everybody want to play in somebody's band. Be your own band. I want to hear your music. I want to hear what you got to offer, not just hear you play somebody else's stuff all the time. You know, so that's an encouraging word for you guys that are trying to wrap up those albums and some music. I'm about to drop some more music. You know, I've been dropping music, but I've been doing some like film scoring type stuff. So the music I've been writing hasn't necessarily been for just, you know, an artist to put out. It's been more film score type stuff. That's why I have create all these different sounds. But yeah, we got some projects coming up, folks. So don't worry. And just, you know, I might do something where we can create a community to support each other's albums when they come out. Cause, you know, it's hard to make it out here as a bassist and an artist for sure. So, y'all let me know in the comments or in the chat or something if that's something y'all would be interested in, a community to share your music with other bass players. You know, now I'll tell you now, I'm not moderating it, but I'll put it together for the community so we can all hear. But just to wrap everything up today, so far, we've got, you know, the POG 3 or the Enzo X, you know, octavers are going to be different than the MXR Poly Blue and the OC5, right? So these ones will need more sound shaping from an additional filter before you go into the other effects versus the Poly Blue and OC5. If you just turn on the octave down, it'll already sound pretty much how you want it to sound. And then you just add some nice drive, good filters in there. Watch that resonance. You don't need 65, 70% resonance on most sounds. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that, bro. Yeah, one day I'm gonna have to get on here and play for y'all for real. You know, it's been a long time since I did like a real actual playing video. Like, I just get on here and just kind of play for you guys, but eventually I'm still working on bringing in my band too. You know, having a band come in and us doing live streams once a week. So that way you guys actually get a chance to hear me play for real, you know, not just hear me play bass lines on Sunday or, you know, I do videotape my other gigs, but a lot of those are private events. So I don't tend to put them out like, you know, everybody doesn't like their private event being broadcast or live streamed or whatever the case. So I can't always put those gigs out. You know, of course, church doesn't mind. They don't mind, rather. You know, so But I want you guys to, because you gotta talk it and walk it now. You feel me? You gotta talk it and walk it. But yeah, so I recommend if you want a bass synth sound, instead of trying to get the individual pedal, just get you a bass synth pedal. But if you do like that octave down sound, make sure you get you a good octaver that got some good options on it. I tend to like electro harmonics a lot. Their tracking is, them and Maris have the best. Them and Maris have the best tracking. They have the best tracking. Yeah, well, I appreciate that. It does take, I've been doing this since not playing bass. I've been playing bass since 10th grade in high school. I'm 36 now, but I've been doing music since I was 4. So bass is the 11th instrument I learned. So I learned to play piano, organ, saxophone, clarinet, flute, trumpet, trombone, tuba. I had all this stuff in my house. Like I didn't have it at first, but I eventually got it from school, and the teachers were very supportive. Teachers would give me extra instruments and stuff. So it was a lot of people. I always tell people this. I never take it for granted that I can play, but I do expect myself to be able to play well because I've been doing it so long. Like, why would you not be good at it by now? Like, be kind of whack. I've been doing it for 32 years and you still can't play. That's a long time, man. But I've had a lot of people along the way that really, really helped me out, man. Like a lot of free lessons, a lot of free gear. Just people seeing me putting in work, and they took a chance and took some of their life and time and helped me. So, I teach now as well. I teach with a nonprofit called FAME, Foundation for Advancing the Music and Education. If you got any young people in the D.C. and DMV area, D.C., Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, and they do music, and, we help them get scholarships. We help them get into great schools. We got students that go to graduated from Juilliard, Berkeley, New School of Music, Townsend, of course, Maryland University, and a bunch of other schools. But yeah, it's a great program. If you have any kids that you in that area that you would want to send our way, feel free. And again, that's FAME. So I don't want to misquote the website. I believe it's famemusic.org. But if you just Google Foundation for Advancement of Music and Education, it's FAME. Yeah, that's the thing, See, you've been playing a long time too. See, I know y'all ain't no beginners. A lot of you guys can play. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, the mistakes will always be there. The real key I found to it is how fast you can recover from a mistake. Wrong notes are gonna happen. It really is. If you keep your mistakes to microseconds instead of seconds, it almost is imperceivable when you mess up because people need a certain amount of time to hear something, and that's why, sometimes you might have to slide into it. Yeah, get that drink. Oh, whoa, that wasn't it. But as long as the pros just recover real fast, man. Yeah, there ain't no wrong notes, boy, because, I'm talking about, there is wrong notes. But when I'm performing, I just make it, even when it come out wrong, I'm still going, hey, your job was to get it right before the show. And inevitably, we human. We're human, so we don't, There's nothing you can do about it. You're gonna make mistakes. It's a weird thing in life, man. You'll work all the time not to make a mistake, and then make a mistake on something simple. It won't even be the hard song. It'll be the easy song, and then you can't remember the joint. Like, you just sheet music falling off the stand or something. You know, weird stuff happens. You know, even when I was playing for like the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, and I was playing a gig with them, like one of my pages, when I was turning, it fell off my stand. I was so luckily I knew the piece enough. You know, they gave us the music 2 months in advance, so I knew the music inside and out. But it's like when you watching it, when you seeing the page fall when you weren't expecting it to, it can startle you. And even if you weren't going to mess up now, you gotta recover quick. Yeah, turn on that memory. That happens, bro. You will go blank on something that you played 1,000 times. Like, you're like, yo, I can't. For me, I can never remember all of Michael Jackson's bass line. Like, I can remember the main part a lot of the times, but I don't be remembering the whole songs. And I've heard those songs my entire life. It doesn't matter to me. Like, the song doesn't, it's not what I'm thinking about every day. You know what I'm saying? It matters to me because it's part of my childhood, but it doesn't always, I don't always just keep it in the forefront of my mind. You know, it just happens. I be like, well, how did the bridge go? Oh, yeah. But it's nothing personal, you know. He doesn't know any of my music. So I think we're about even on that, you know, me and Michael Jack. You know what I'm saying? You don't know none of mine. I know parts of yours. I think we even. You know, but he was a great artist, man. Him and Prince, you know, I was waiting to see who was going, you know. Yeah, him and what's my man? Filling Gaines. What's my man name? I can't remember. I'm terrible with names. See, that's why I don't like naming folks. But what's my man that did the synth bass stuff on there? He did a great job too. But yeah, they had a lot of, their whole staff was amazing. Can you? Now, they didn't have nobody, the songs like we have now, to hear those synth bass stuff. You know, for them to program, you know, they already had, you know, is crazy. That sound is crazy. Yes, that's exactly who it is. Greg Filling Gaines. He did that bass line part on Thriller. But just that him and Mike, you got to give Michael Jackson credit as well for that, you know, for being a visionary artist to where he would hear those sounds and allow them to use it, you know what I'm saying? But they didn't have the references we have to create all these different synth bass sounds. Like, that's a legendary synth bass sound that everybody wants to use for different stuff. And it kind of gives you a good, if you can get to that synth bass sound, you can get to a lot of other ones from that one. You know, so that, I mean, they might not have been thinking I'm creating something genius. They just creating, you know, but it ended up being genius, you know. But yeah, so see what we got here. Feel free to ask any questions before I get out of here, because I'm about to wrap this up, folks. I definitely appreciate y'all hanging in there with me. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Check out all my other videos, you know. Got hours and hours and hours of live streams on YouTube. you know, as well as you got the shorts. And I'm going give you guys like some 5-10 minute videos in there of some different topics as well. So definitely go and check out the channel for more videos. Yep. And the Shaka Khan stuff. Shaka Khan was another one that had a lot of like dope synth bass parts done on it, you know, and he did some of that stuff as well. So these guys, they're not, you know, they didn't have the presets. You know what I'm saying? They didn't have the presets. You know what I'm saying? You had to create those sounds, and a lot of times you had to recreate them if you needed them again. You know, and that's a hard way to go. That's a hard way to go, man. And these guys, they had it all in their head, memorized. Prince was another one that was an amazing with the sounds, not just the songs, the sounds that they was picking and using. And, you know, a lot of that is Prince actually playing those parts. Yeah, you know, he had his little even the Batman, you know, theme song, getting into film scoring and stuff, you know, that's dope within itself as well, because that's a different lane than being a regular artist. You know, Prince was not just a regular artist. He could definitely do it from top to bottom. You know what I'm saying? That's what I love about a lot of people like him. You know, they can do it from top to bottom. You know, we don't have to have a whole team. The team is whatever I can't do, and Prince is pretty much could do everything he need to do. So that was amazing. But yeah, so make sure you guys check out all my social media as well, at the Bass Nagus on all social media. Check out Patreon for your preset packs, or if you want to support the channel for $1, $5 every month. Definitely helps us out a lot. Shout out to all the people currently on Patreon that have bought preset packs for the different pedals. And make sure you check out, if you want to check out my music, allbasscreations.bandcamp. I did an entire album with just my bass and effects, and I didn't use any MIDI, and that was way before I had any of these synth pedals or anything. So I used just effects and turned my bass sound into everything else that I needed to create the record. So check that out on allbasscreations.bandcamp. And I will catch you guys later. Thanks for hanging with me.